Hello, boys and girls. Mrs. Hughes here, ready to do another read aloud with you. Today we're going to reread our story from yesterday, a Squiggly Story, and we're going to slow down just a little bit and we're going to ask a few questions as we read. It's very important to reread stories to learn more about them. I'm going to be asking questions, and so when you see this wand, it's my light bulb wand. It's my thinking wand. That means I'm getting ready to ask a question, and I want you to slow down and think about what I'm asking. And then you can talk about it with someone next to you or your stuffed animal. Okay? So you think before you answer. It's very important. So that is my thinking wand. I'm going to ask you a question right now. Are you ready? Who are the characters in this story? Characters, if you remember, are who the story is about. Who is this story about? Yes, the little boy, the sister. Are there any more characters? They're the two main characters. Do you remember anybody else in the story? Yes, you're right. His teacher, Mrs. Singh, and his classmates. Very good. Kiss your brain. I have another question for you. Do you remember where this story happened and when? That's called the setting. The setting is where and when the story happens. We just talked about characters. Now we're talking about setting. Stories can happen lots of different places, and they can happen at different times during the day or night. So do you remember when our story happened and where? It happened over a couple of days. And where? At his house and at his school, in his classroom. Very good. Okay, we're going to get started. And remember, as I read, I'm going to ask questions. Okay, here we go. A Squiggly Story by Andrew Larson and Mike Lowry. Here's the title page. Here's where the story starts. My sister loves to read. Big words and little words, page after page, word after word. My sister loves to write. Big words and little words, page after page, and word after word. Sometimes I pretend that I can write too. Big letters and little letters, swirl after swirl and squiggle after squiggle. A question for you. What is the boy writing? Yes, he's writing letters. And he's got different kinds of squiggles and swirls. Yes, I even see some words. This word says mom. And this one says hat. So he's beginning to write some words. Let's keep reading. What are you doing? I asked one day while we're sitting at the kitchen table. I'm writing a story, she said. I wish I could write a story, he said. You can. It's easy. But how? I know my letters, but I don't know many words. Well, she said, write what you know. Every story starts with a single word, and every word starts with a single letter. Why don't you start there, with a letter? So I get out my crayons and pencils and my pad of paper, and I start to write. I start with a single letter. It's an easy letter. I. Yes, that's me, he said. A question for you. Who is the first character in the little boy's story? And how can you tell? Yes, well, he wrote the the word I. The capital letter I is also a word. And he says I, and even in his speech bubble, he says, that's me. So the first character in his story is himself. Very good. Kiss your ring. That's a good beginning, his sister said. Now what? What's going to happen? How should I know? He said. It's your story. You're the boss. I what? I'm stuck. What happens in my story? I draw a circle. It's a soccer ball. Then I write another letter. U. I, soccer ball, U. It's you, I said to my sister. I'm playing soccer with you. Great. Where are we playing soccer? Well, maybe we're at the beach, I suggest. We've never played soccer on the beach. So I do a bunch of dots for the sand on the beach. Then I make a bunch of V's. Big V's and little V's, wave after wave in the ocean. Now what? She asked. What do you mean? Well, you have a beginning. Now we're in the middle of the story. Something else has to happen so we can get to the end. I'm stuck again. I start doodling. I doodle another V, but this time it's upside down. Oh no! It's a shark! Ah! It's getting closer and closer, and bigger and bigger. I flip the page to get away from the shark. I have a question for you. So what happens in the middle of the boy's story? Yes. At the beginning, he's playing soccer on the beach with his sister. But then, what happens next? In the middle of the story, the shark comes. Yes. And here's a funny question. Why do you think he flipped the page to get away from the shark? Yes, because he can start another part of his story if he flips the page. So we're going to flip the page and go on to the next part of this story. The next day, I bring my story to school. It's my turn for show and tell. That means I get to sit in Miss Singh's chair and tell my story. This is Mrs. Singh, my teacher. Last night, I started to write a story. It's sort of squiggly, but here goes. Once upon a time, there was a brother and a sister, and they loved to play soccer. One day, they had an idea. They decided to play soccer on the beach, so they went to the beach and played soccer. Then they noticed something coming toward them in the water. It was a shark! A real live shark! It was getting closer and closer, bigger and bigger. And that's as far as it got, he said. That's wonderful, says Mrs. Singh. What happens next? What about the shark? What about the brother and the sister? I don't know. I'm stuck. Class, does anyone have an idea? Jake waves his hand in the air. I do, he said. Maybe one of them kicks the ball and it hits the shark in the head. Ew. Then maybe the shark bites the ball with his big pointy shark teeth. Aaliyah, another classmate, offers another idea. What if the shark's name is Squiggles? What if Squiggles is a vampire shark? What if she invites the brother and sister to ride on her back? And what if they become a vampire family and live forever? Vampires can't swim. Everybody knows that. See his face right here? Of course they can swim. Vampires can do anything, she says. But it's my story, and I don't want vampires in my story. No vampires. If I was writing a story, I'd have lots of vampires. Then you should write one. But I like yours. So I have another question for you. The thinking one. What does the boy think of Aaliyah's idea? What does the little boy think of her idea about the vampire sharks? Yeah, he doesn't seem to like that idea. He doesn't want to use vampires. How do you know that's how he feels? Why does he feel that way? Yeah, he tells her in the story, this is my story, and I don't want vampires. He doesn't want vampires in his story, and that's fine, because it's his story. She can write her own. That night, after dinner, I sit down beside my sister. Her face is buried in a book. I say, I've been thinking about my story all day, and I still don't know how to end it. Well, remember, you're the author, she says without looking up. You can do whatever you want, she says. So I get my pencil and I start with a bunch of stars. Then I add a few exclamation marks. My sister told me that exclamation marks make things exciting. She's right. It's very exciting. And I add a couple of slanting lines. What's going on? She asks, looking up from her book. It's nighttime. The stars are out, the shark has gone away, and we decide to go for a walk on the beach. That's when we discover this giant rocket ship. Wow, that sounds cool, she says. Then what happens? We hear a voice. It's counting down. You count with me, okay? Here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Blast off! Not yet, not yet, not yet, he says, adding one more squiggle. Just before the rocket blasts off, we spy a Martian, or alien, looking out through a window. The Martian invites us to climb aboard. Whoa, that's a great ending, his sister says. Now I have an idea for my next story. It's going to be about a little boy who climbs aboard a rocket ship and takes a trip to Mars. And I think I know just how to begin. So here is his next story. All right, I have one more question before we're finished. In the beginning of this book, the boy thinks he can't write a story because he doesn't know any words. What do you think? Can you write stories even when you don't know any words? Yes, of course you can. Did he write a story? Yes, he did write a story. He wrote what he knew, and then he just added pictures for the rest. You're right. And you know, in kindergarten this year, you are going to be an author that writes words and an illustrator that draws pictures. You are going to write stories too. A Squiggly Story is such a great book to help you learn that everyone can be an author and an illustrator. You just write what you know. Thanks for listening with me today, guys, and answering some questions and using that thinking brain. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.